We are live on Facebook. We can start our meeting right now. Tejasri, over to you for introduction.
Sir, Saranna, unmute.
Yes, sir. We are live on Facebook. Because of technical issue, YouTube is not working.
Yes, you can go ahead. Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, audible. Tejasri, over to you.
Okay, sir. So, good afternoon, everyone. Today we have with us a renowned personality and a very well-known name in the field of law, Advocate Shri B. Abbarsal. Thank you, sir, for your valuable time and for the session. Sir has started his studies in the law in the year in 1966, and immediately from the second year, that is from 1967, has started teaching law, and since then has been continuously teaching law for the past 53 years. He stood first in LLM, also secured gold medal. He has delivered lectures in various universities, law colleges, bar association, and various government training centers. He started his practice in Pune in 1968, having a standing of 52 years, and has practiced before the Bombay High Court and Supreme Court. He has a member of BCMG for 2 terms from 1985 to 1997, and has also been the chairman of BCMG in the year 1989 to 1990. Sir, we are glad to have you with us again. It will be take 1 and more hour to introduce the sir. So without wasting much time, eagerly all participants are waiting to hear you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Welcome everybody. And first let me congratulate and compliment Professor Sadbhai and his associates that you have been putting this time to such fruitful and useful purpose. Today, subject assigned to me is the Hindu co-partitionary and the amendments of the Hindu Succession Act 1956. To understand the concept of Hindu law, it is essential that one should know the very system of Hindu law. Normally, as it happens, that laws which are personal, in law, what you call personal law, Muslim law is personal law, Christian laws, some laws are personal laws, likewise Hindu law is personal law. Now, this personal law, as in most of the religious systems it was, there was no Hindu law known to anybody till recently. All that was known was the Vedic system. And in olden days, the king made law or a law given by political authority, as nowadays we have got. It was not there. The religious rules were governing spirituality as well as the relationship between the parties, what you call the positive activity. And therefore, in those days, the dharma that was not strictly religion now. The old meaning of dharma was that it was a system wherein the rule of law, rule of the dharma were regulating the religion, what you call today, and the legal system, what you call today, justice system, put together. Or dharma had 2 meanings. One was achara. Achara part of dharma today is called religion. And other part of dharma, meaning of dharma was vyavara. Vyavara part of dharma today is given to parliament, legislature, political authority. In olden days, as you know, that in King's Darbar, there always used to be the people learned in dharma. And king had no authority to make laws. he had authority only to execute the law, administer the law, giving effect to the law. So even if somebody had committed some offense and offense was proved, the one who was learned in dharma, he was called upon that what is the rule of dharma on this point, and once he had told that rule, accordingly punishment was administered. It was that way. The basic origin of Hindu dharma, Hindu system, is claimed in Vedas. As a Hindu believes that his dharma or system has come to him from Almighty or from Paramatma. And when the Almighty created this universe, he also gave their dharma to mankind. That was spoken thing. What was spoken with the Vedas. These were directly from the Almighty. That what was spoken by the Almighty was heard, Shruta, by the humanity. And that was the Shruti. So these Veda Shrutis are the original sources of Hindu law. And now all the scientists as well as the Pandits in Hindu law, Hindu system, have agreed that oldest of these Vedas is Rig Veda, and the time of Rig Veda is around 6,000 to 7,000 years before Christ. That is 8,000 to 9,000 years from today. At that time, the first source of Hindu law was there, the Vedas. Now, in those days, there was no other religion, and therefore it was just called Dharma, or Vedic Dharma at the most we may call. Thereafter, when the society was developing, needs of the society were developing, new problems were coming up, and the rules in Vedas were found to be insufficient. Then people approached the rishis and sadhus, santas, or the learned people, sages in this system, and asked that king cannot give us the law. What are the rules for our this and this problem? Now, those sages, they did not claim any authorship to themselves. They said that Paramatma must have spoken everything. But it is we people that we have forgotten many things. Now give me time. I will just search within myself, seek some light from Paramatma, and tell you what the thing is. And after a few days, he were coming out with some solutions, saying that this was spoken by the Almighty, but forgotten by the humanity. Now, with the grace of Almighty, I am remembering that. And that he used to tell. So that what was forgotten, but subsequently remember Smruta. That was Smruti. And this way, various Smritis were written. However, the first Smriti is Manusmriti. And whatever happens in other fields, for we lawyers and judges, today I am happy that there are many judges also. We lawyers and judges, we are bound to go to those rules of Manusmriti where from the legal system started. And as the things go on, mostly the root cause of any legal dispute, legal trouble is always property. So in Manusmriti, Manu had given a rule that when a person dies, his property passes to his sapindas. The word sapinda was used by him. At that time, maybe that everybody understood what sapinda means. And there was no reason for any interpretation. However, in the run of time, the two rishis sitting at different places interpreted this word sapinda in two different ways. Yajnavalkya interpreted sapinda to mean of the same blood propinquity. While another rishi who was sitting in Bengal, not knowing what Yajnavalkya had done, in his Smriti, he wrote, Jimutwana wrote, that word sapinda means religious efficacy, offering pindadanam in bandhus, etc. And because of this, the heirs were different. After on Yajnavalkya Smriti, Vijnaneshwara wrote a commentary. That commentary is today known, or he had given name to that commentary as the Smriti, that is to say now Manusmriti, on that Yajnavalkya Smriti, on that Vijnaneshwara. Now, the Daibhaga Smriti, it is followed today also in Bengal. Those Hindus are called Daibhaga Hindus. While Vijnaneshwara Smriti, it is named as Mitakshara. And in rest of India, this Mitakshara is followed, and therefore all the Hindus except Bengal are Mitakshara Hindus, and Hindus in Bengal are Daibhag Hindus. Amongst Daibhag, there is no coparcenary. There is succession only. While it is only for Mitakshara Hindus that there is a system of coparcenary which is followed in rest of India. And today, to understand who a Hindu is very important thing. That we normally say 2600 years back, Mahavira, thereafter the Buddhist system established by Gautam Buddha, then English system, Muslim system 1400 years back. All these are subsequent developments. While in those days, when this Mitakshara system was developing, they believed that in Mitakshara, the Hinduism is totally inclusive. That is to say, today, if you read any of the enactments, they say, who is Hindu? Hindu means and includes HJBS, Hindus, Jains, Buddhists, Sikhs, and all the sects, Arya Samajist, Prarthana Samajist, Lingayats. In southern parts, some other sects are there. All those sects are Hindus. Hindu law applies to them. As well as everywhere there is a rule that there should be some law of land, what is called lex loci. So if suppose that a person does not belong to Christianity, does not belong to Muslim system, is not Zoroastrian, Parsi, or is not a Jew, then he is a Hindu. So even if in some ulterior areas, persons may not be exactly knowing what their dharma is, but they are following the tradition of Hinduism, they are Hindus. Or when person cannot show to what other religion he belongs, presumption in India is he is Hindu. It is all pervaded. Now in this Hindu system, there is a basic notion of a Hindu joint family, very important one. A Hindu joint family, it is patriarchal family, that is to say, a male ancestor, all male descendants of a male ancestor, plus the women married into the family, the daughters so long they are not married, minus daughters married out of the family, who are joint at board and joint in worship. That worship, that is Hinduism, and joint at board residence. So those people who live together, who eat together, and all of whom are Hindus, worship together, they are a joint family. How many generations? No restriction. Any number of generations can form a Hindu joint family. How many persons? There is no question. And it is not necessary that a Hindu joint family should possess any property. Or as a very apt statement thereof goes, that there can be a Hindu joint family of beggars also. Not necessary, no condition precedent that there should be any property. However, if a Hindu joint family possesses any property, and now for some time we will be discussing the position that was obtaining prior to 1956. Presume that those particular days. So in those days, if there was any property which was possessed by the family, then the ownership of that property was vesting only in males, not females. And that too, males within 4 degrees. That is to say, the senior-most male member of the family, who was called Karta, he was the manager. The next generation, next thereto, and next thereto. That is 4 generations at a time. Those were the owner of that property, and this relationship was called a co-parcenary. It is not co-partnership. It is different. We will come to that point. So in this co-parcenary, if there was a family property, what was known as ancestral property, then ownership was not vesting in any one individual. Ownership always vested in 4 generations at a time. Therefore, if there was an ancestor, and this ancestor was holding some ancestral property, then ownership of this property was in his hands as the Karta, his son, son's son, and son's son's son at a time 4 generations. Or in other words, what is ancestral property? Your definitions today tell you that any property which is inherited by a Hindu from his father, father's father, or father's father's father is ancestral in his hands. Suppose that there is father, father's father, or father's father's father dead, and they had left behind some property in the hands of this holder, H. Now, H is unmarried today. He is the sole surviving co-partner. He is absolute owner. He can deal with the property as he pleases. But the moment he begets a son, the son gets interest by birth. And how much interest he gets? Equally with father. Both are taking equal share. Suppose that he gets another son. He also gets share by birth equally with father and elder son. Therefore, if property is received, inherited by a Hindu from his father, father's father, or father's father's father, it is ancestral in his hands with reference to his son, son's son, and son's son's son. And these people get interest in that property, right in that property by birth. It is very important. Normally, when you are reading other succession laws, always one has to see that the previous owner, so long he is living, heirs are not there. Who are the heirs is also not known. The moment a person dies living behind property, then succession opens and property goes to the heirs who according to law are there. While in a co-partnership, it is not that a previous owner is dead and therefore a person is taking interest. A co-partner takes interest by birth. The moment he is born, he gets interest. Here, just understand it properly. One proposition that normally in examinations or in courts, it bothers you, that if suppose that there is a holder H, his father is dead. Father's father is also dead. So F1 is dead, F2 is dead. Father's father's father is also dead. F3 is dead. And F4 is yet living. Great grandfather. He is living. Now he is the manager. In his hand there is ancestral property. When he got a son, that is F3, he got interest by birth. When he got F2, he also was, F1 was also co-partner, but all of them, they are dead. And now this Hindu in question, he is at the 5th degree. Now he is not a co-partner because co-partner at a time is only. If he gets a property from 5th generation, that is not ancestral. Likewise, suppose that he got property from father, father's father, or father's father's father, and his son is dead, son's son is dead, son's dead, and S4 is living. Now, co-partnership is extending to 4 degrees at a time, including the holder, Karta. So, up to S3, co-partnership extends. S4 is now beyond 4 degrees and therefore he is not co-partner. While when we say that co-partner is limited to 4 degrees at a time, it is not 4 degrees from the ancestor. It is 4 degrees at a time from the common ancestor, whoever it is. In other words, as the earlier generation passes out, the subsequent generations are promoted. And as in a train, some people get down at a station, some others go into the train, and the train goes on with the limited number of carriages. That way, at a time, 4 carriages, 4 generations. But when earlier generation goes out, subsequent generation is included and so on. So 2 statements now we made. One was that a joint family is not limited to any degrees. Any number of generations can be there in a Hindu joint family. While if Hindu joint family possesses ancestral property, then ownership of that ancestral property is vesting only in the male members within the family and within 4 degrees at a time, not beyond. Now, in this system, a problem was there that there can be a vertical co-partnership or there can be a collateral co-partnership. That is to say, suppose if there is a grandfather, father and son, vertical co-partnership. But if suppose that grandfather is dead, he had 2 sons and B and C. And this B and C have got their own sons. Now, there is no common ancestor, but there are collaterals. And this is a collateral co-partnership. Now, in a co-partnership, co-partners have got certain specific rights. One of their primary rights is enjoyment. Every co-partner is entitled to enjoy the family property, as well as a co-partner has a right of alienating the property, disposing of the property, selling of the property. And most important right of a co-partner is that a co-partner can at any time demand partition. Now, this issue of partition requires close attention, that normally partition for you means division of the property. In Hindu law, that is not so. So suppose that 2 partners are there and they have got some property they want to partition. Partition means division. Or co-owners have purchased the property together. That sale deed defines their shares, either equal or proportionate to the capital contributed by them. And partition only means division of that share which is already defined. While in a co-partnership, partition first means definition. Or in a co-partnership, as we said, that one gets interest by birth. Likewise, if a person dies within a co-partnership, there is no succession. The interest of the deceased goes by what is known as survivorship, or it is commensality of interest. All together hold the own and each one holds the whole. किंवा को-पार्टनरशिप मध्ये कुणाचा शेअर किती आहे कुणाला कधीही सांगता येत नाही. This share is fluctuating. If newborn are there, share goes down. If deaths are there, share increases. And even on death, there is no succession. By survivorship, those who survive will get it. In other words, in a Hindu joint family, the shares are fluctuating. Those are never definite. Those are never certain unless partition is there. And what is partition? Partition in Hindu law, as we say, suppose that when you file a suit in the court, the cause of action is required to be given. And when client comes to you and says that I want to file a suit against my family members, I demanded partition, but father refused. Now, in such a case, what is the cause of action? Yet the property is not divided. But cause of action is when partition was demanded. So in Hindu law, partition demanded is partition effected. At that moment, share of a person is defined. There is no necessity that it should be divided. Or let us take one very interesting example. Suppose that there is a father and he has got 3 sons, S1, S2 S3. And there is ancestral property, father is Karta now. It is in his hands. Now S3, he comes forward and says that, father, I demand partition. Now S1 and S2, two brothers, they are trying to persuade him that we don't want partition. Let us live together. No partition is required. He says, no, I want partition. And suppose that this father, an old styled man of old thinking, if he were to say that, you son, in my family, in 7 generations, there was never a partition. And you are claiming partition? Of this shock, father dies. Say 10-15 days pass. वाटल्यास ते लोक लज्जस्तव लाजे काजस्तव काय म्हणायचं तोपर्यंत हा थांबला. And then after 15 days, now who is the Karta? S1, senior most son is the Karta. He tells him that, brother, give me my partition. He says, all right, take your partition, goodbye. What is share of S3? What is share of S3? Important question I'm asking and I'm answering myself. Don't say share of S3 is 1/3. Because take for instance a case, if father was not that weak-hearted person, and if he would have said that, you incompetent son, you demand partition, I will not give you partition, do whatever you please. Now he goes in the court and files a suit. What will be his share? 1/4, because father 1 share and 3 sons 1 share each. Now partition is effected when partition is demanded. Demand of partition is effect of partition. So at that time father was living. At that time, if share is defined, fixed, then his share was father 1 share and 3 sons 1 share is 1/4. That 1/4 is to be divided subsequently, and next moment father died. So when father died, he was already partitioned S3, and there was a co-partitionary of S1, S2 and father. When there is a co-partitionary, there is no succession. In a co-partitionary, there is survivorship only. And then father's share will pass to S1 and S2, and S3 will get 1/4 only. This way, the partition is to be understood. Or because of this, we have to understand the concept of property in Hindu law. In Hindu law, properties are of various types. Ancestral property we have seen. It is the property which is inherited from father, father's father, or father's father's father, and in which the co-parcels are getting share by birth equally with father. And even if a co-parcel dies, there is no succession, there is survivorship, remaining members enjoy. While there can be a separate property also. So suppose that a maternal uncle gives some gift to a person, that is separate property. In separate property, there is no co-partitionary. And such person is absolute owner. He can do with the property whatever he pleases to do. In ancestral property, there are peculiar things. Those are called as incidents of co-partitionary or ancestral property. One of the incidents of ancestral property is whatever are the accretions to ancestral, whatever are the additions to the ancestral, those are also ancestral. What properties are clubbed with ancestral are also ancestral. Or under that doctrine of clubbing, that if you allow the property, which is your separate property, to be mixed up with ancestral property, and you do not retain your separate rights, then that ancestral property under doctrine of blending will become ancestral property. किंवा आपण सोपं असं म्हणू की एखादा करोनाचा पेशंट असेल आणि तुम्ही सजेस्ट केलं याला काय झालंय करोना होय, मग चांगल्या 10 लोकांमध्ये जे कोणी निरोगी आहेत, सशक्त आहेत, अशा 10 लोक त्याला 4-5 दिवस ठेवा, आपोआप त्यांचा चांगला गुण जो आहे, चांगलं आरोग्य जे आहे त्याला लाभेल आणि हा नीट होईल. असं होईल का? नाही, इट इज वन वे ओनली. त्या 10 लोकांना करोना होईल पण याचा नाही सुरायचा. So just like these contagious diseases, ancestral property is contagious. If you allow other properties to mix up with ancestral property and you do not reserve your rights to claim it separate claims, then it also becomes ancestral under doctrine of blending. Now because of this, if somebody gets a capital out of ancestral property from father and starts a business, maybe that he is working 24 hours and then he makes a fortune. Whatever the money, whatever the property he has acquired, all that property also becomes ancestral property. And to what extent our earlier generation went? Suppose that if it was something like this, that a father educated one of his sons, and after taking education, this son became a quite learned man, and with that learning, he was making good earning, a doctor, a lawyer, a professor, whatsoever, and then he purchased certain properties. Other brothers were telling or were arguing that whatever was used for your education was ancestral fund, that is nucleus. If nucleus is ancestral, acquisition is ancestral. आता कायद्याने असं म्हटलं की इथपर्यंत तर्क नेणं म्हणजे खूपच झालं आता हे. काहीतरी याच्यावर बंधन आणलं पाहिजे. And therefore in 1930, the Gains of Learning Act was passed. And it was said, even if for educating that person, the parents have spent ancestral funds, it is parental duty, it is not advancement, it is not a loan given, and therefore it will not be considered to be a nucleus. Whatever property he has acquired with his knowledge, with that scientific knowledge, that is his self-acquired property. So now in the beginning we said that there is ancestral property which is co-parcenary property, there is separate property, and now there is self-acquired property from 1930. In self-acquired property also, other members of co-parcenary do not have any interest, there is no co-parcenary, and the person who acquires it, who earns it, he is the absolute owner of that property. So from 1930, there were three types of properties in Hindu law: the ancestral, separate, and self-acquired, and co-parcenary is limited to ancestral property only. Now, in this partitions and co-parcenary law, that normally, whenever there is a partition, the shares are given per sterpiece. Suppose that there are two brothers and their father is dead. These two brothers, they are holding the property. Senior brother is the Karta, and each of the brother, one has got one son and other has got two sons. Now, if tomorrow there is a partition, first it will be a per branch partition. Per sterpiece, S-T-I-R-P-E-S, per sterpiece, it is per branch. So A is one branch, B is one branch, one half. Then A and his son get one half, B and his two sons get one half. If within B's branch also there is a partition, again per sterpiece, each one getting equally, son gets equally with father, accordingly partition is made. Every son has a right to claim partition. But some co-partners or some members of the family who are entitled to a share are not entitled to claim partition. One such person is, suppose that there is father, there is a son, S1, and S1 has got another son, S2. Now this S2, he wants to claim partition. Law says, so long your father is living, it is his right to claim partition, you cannot claim partition. So a co-partner is not entitled to claim partition so long his father is living with his own father or collaterals, and father does not demand partition. Another rule says that whenever there is a partition between father and sons, then the holder's wife, father's wife, is entitled to a share equally with her own sons. That is to say, if there is a father, wife, and two sons, the wife does not have a right to claim partition. She cannot claim partition. But if one of the sons claims partition, then she has a right to claim share equally with son. And therefore, in such a case, suppose that S2 claims partition. Father one share, mother one share, S1 one share, S2 one fourth. This way the shares will be there. Now, in this whole system, there were certain shortcomings. There were certain defects. One of the important defects was, what about daughters? what about other women? That they had only a right of maintenance and marriage expenses for daughters. Those were their rights, nothing beyond that. In 1937, one law was passed, and by that law, Hindu Women's Right to Property Act, some limited rights during her lifetime were given, and with those limited rights, the Hindu woman had to be satisfied. However, after the Constitution, that is when in 1950, the Constitution was enforced, thereafter, there was a thinking that why there should not be equality of women when Constitution grants equality to all, why there should be in these days also, in this century also, there should be the injustice done to women. A daughter is not given share, wife is not given share. This is not proper, and therefore, in 1955-56, Hindus took a very good step, which we can say it was a revolution, that 4 acts came to be passed in these 2 years. In 1955, the first act, that was Hindu Marriage Act. So the traditional marriage law was abrogated, replaced by the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955. In 1956, the Hindu Succession Act, Adoption Maintenance Act, the Guardianship Act. When these 4 acts were passed, the old law that was existing as the Hindu textual law, what we call, or Vedic law, that was replaced by these acts. And today also, so far joint family is concerned, ancestral property is concerned, partition is concerned, their shares are concerned, the old system continues. So today, the textual law means the religious traditional law, and the enactments are these 4 enactments which are effective today. Of this, what we are discussing is the Hindu Succession Act 1956. In 1956, a revolutionary measure was taken, and it was provided that hereafter, in a Hindu copastry, the women shall have certain rights. And particularly, Section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act 1956 provided that from the date of this act, if a Hindu were to die having interest in copastry, till now his interest was passing by survivorship to other copastors, while now it was said it will not happen that way. There will be 2 propositions. If suppose that he has not left behind any year specified here, then it will go by survivorship, this act will not apply, and copastry will take care of it. But if the deceased has left behind a female heir of class 1 or a male heir claiming through such female heir of class 1, then copastry law will not apply, this act will apply. And as it stood in 1956, the 12 class 1 heirs were there. In that, son, daughter, widow, mother, son, daughter, widow of a predeceased son, son, daughter, widow of a predeceased son of a predeceased son, son and daughter of a predeceased daughter. These were all class 1 heirs. Of these, any female heir or a male heir, that is to say, predeceased daughter's son, if they were there, then the copastry law did not apply, survivorship did not apply, and this act applied. And when this act applied, the property of the deceased was to pass. The question is, suppose that there is a father, he has got 2 sons, wife and 1 daughter, and now it is said that the section 8, 9 tell you that there are equal shares. So daughter says, I have got equal share. But sons were saying, no doubt you have got equal share, but equal share in whose property? We are not dead. It is father's property wherein you have got equal share with us. And therefore in the copastry, what was his property will have to be found out. Just now we had seen that for finding out what the property of a copastry is, there must be a partition. Here was no partition. and therefore a proviso was provided for. And that proviso to section 6, old section 6, it said that first part said that if there is a co-partnership, this act does not apply and the interest of the deceased will pass by survivorship. While second part said, however, provided that, however, if there is a female heir of class 1 or a male heir claiming through such female heir of class 1, property of the deceased shall pass under this act and not by survivorship. And for providing what is this property of the deceased, explanation was given. What we people generally call in the courts a notional partition. Explanation said, for ascertaining the property of the deceased, it shall be assumed as if there was a partition between the deceased person and other members of co-partnership. किंवा सोपं लक्षात ठेवायला मी नेहमी असं म्हणतो की 56 नंतर मरणारा हिंदू हे राम म्हणत नाही, तो पार्टिशन म्हणतो. And rule of law in partition is that when partition is demanded, partition is effected. So if there is a family of a father, mother, 2 sons and a daughter. Now for this mother and daughter, they are class 1 female heirs. Therefore now Hindu Succession Act 1956 applied and a notional partition is effected. So who are the co-partners and who are entitled to a share? Daughter is not a co-partner. Daughter is not entitled to a share on partition. However, these 2 sons, S1, S2, they are co-partners with father. Father is co-partner. Their mother, wife of the holder, she is not a co-partner. But under the rules of partition law, when there is a partition between father and sons, the mother is entitled to share equally with sons. Therefore, in this case, father, mother, and 2 sons, these 4 people, they are entitled to a share on partition. Father's share at the time of his death was 1/4. S1 got 1/4 on partition, S2 got 1/4 on partition, mother got 1/4 on partition, and this 1/4 of deceased, dead person, father, it was to pass under this act. And then the section 8 and 9 provided that it shall go equally to his heirs, sons, daughters, etc. Daughter is equal now. So that 1/4 of father would go equally to whom? Son 1, son 2, mother, and daughter. So daughter in effect got 1/4 of 1/4, that is 1/16. And each of the son and mother, they got 1/4 on partition and 1/16 on succession, that is 5/16 each. म्हणजेच मग 56च्या कायद्याने असं झालं की जरी असं म्हटलं गेलं की डॉटरला इक्वल राईट दिलाय, तरी तो एवढा इक्वल नव्हता. आणि मग जरी राईट दिला तरी हा राईट कुणीतरी डॉटरने नेलाय, घेतलाय, असं फारसं कधी सापडलंच नाही. बिकॉज फॉर दॅट मार्जिनल स्मॉल राईट, who is going to fight with brothers and to get the relationship spoiled? Therefore, it was not effective relief. This was always considered that some more effective way should be there. This went on and Maharashtra took a lead. Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and some other states. And in 1994, Maharashtra made an amendment. To this act, states according to a tradition, rudis, the changes can be made, amendments can be made. Maharashtra made an amendment in 1994, and by that amendment, in chapter 2A, section 29A, 29B, and 29C were added in 1994, and Maharashtra, taking lead in India, said that on and from this date, the daughter shall become a co-partner, will have equal rights with son in co-partnership also. So if now father were to die, she will get equal share on partition and equal share on succession also. This was one thing. While the other thing that was done by 1994 Act was, it was said that she has become co-partner. However, a limitation was put that if any properties which were transferred, which were alienated, mortgaged, or which were partitioned before the commencement of 94 Act. Those were, in those, daughter could not claim any share, and if daughter was married before the commencement of this act, she was also excluded. She did not get any share in that property. So only unmarried daughters at the commencement of the 1994 Act were getting a share as co-partner equally with sons. However, if there was any partition before that date or alienation before that date, that was excluded. With these limits, two things were happening. One was that partition in Hindu law, how it can be? It can be oral also. Even today's Registration Act does not demand that partition should be registered so far Hindu law is concerned, or there can be family arrangements also. It is allowed. And therefore, if suppose that these brothers now were to collude against the sister and were to bring into existence some backdated partition, it was also excluded, and daughter did not get any share. Because of this, some changes were required. Another difficulty of 1994 amendment was that this amendment was made by Maharashtra. So it was applicable within Maharashtra. So properties which were within Maharashtra held by the family were regulated by this act. But suppose that a family was holding some properties in Delhi, some properties in Bangalore, and other places outside Maharashtra. Then in those places, the Maharashtra Amendment of 1994 did not apply. In those places only, the old law was applicable, 1956 law was applicable. Another important thing was simultaneously happening was that under the 1956 Act, as one of the revolutionary steps was to make this act applicable at least to some extent, another important step taken was Section 14 of the Hindu Succession Act 1956. Section 14 had made a revolutionary declaration that till now the women had only limited ownership, at the most a charge, that she could hold property for life or for her maintenance, nothing more. Under 37 Act also it was limited right. Section 14 had said in 1956 that any property possessed by Hindu female at the commencement of this act shall become absolute property of that woman. It should be a Hindu woman. So she should get some property as under Hindu law. Even if it was limited ownership, she will become absolute owner of that property. And Section 15 and 16 define who her heirs shall be. It will not go to husband's heirs or father's heirs. Her own heirs it will go. This was one very important step. Now, if this was to apply, 94 amendment made a problem between other states and Maharashtra. However, what Maharashtra had done was a more equitable thing. Greater justice was done to women, and therefore center also was impressed by this. And ultimately, in 2005, there was a central amendment made. That is the amendment of 2005 made to the Hindu Succession Act 1956. This amendment was made applicable from 9/9/2005, that is 9th of September 2005. Therefrom it applies. And what this amendment did, the earlier Section 6 was replaced. Earlier Section 6 was saying that if there is a co-partnership, this act will not apply, by survivorship property will pass. Provided that if there is a female heir of class 1, then only this act will apply and notional partition will be there. Now, this section was replaced by new Section 6. And today's Section 6, it says that devolution of interest in the co-partnership, and it further says that on and from the commencement of this act, every daughter shall become a co-pastor. Daughter is made co-pastor, having equal rights with son. She can even dispose of her rights by will, testamentary succession, that is also allowed to her. And she will also be liable to answer all the liabilities that a co-pastor is liable. So she becomes a joint family member and co-pastory member also. This is all right, that was done. Another problem that was left by the Maharashtra Act, we said 94 amendment, that if there was a partition before the commencement of that act, those partitions were excluded, and experience was that false backdated documents were brought, and therefore then this act wanted to rectify that mistake, and it provided that any partition or alienation, transfer, etc., if those are made before the commencement of this act, 2005 act, then those are excluded. But a partition will be recognized only when it is a registered partition. So difference between 94 Act and 2005 Act, Amendment Act, is that here partition has got to be registered partition, otherwise it will not be recognized. And 94 Amendment of Maharashtra was saying that a daughter, if married, is excluded, she does not become a co-pastor. Here 2005 Act says that all daughters have become co-pastors. Even if she is married, she becomes a co-pastor. Effect of this was, there was a lot of litigation. And in this litigation particularly, the proposition, when it was before Bombay High Court, what is known as Ganorkar's case. In that case, when the High Court was possessed of this problem, that if a daughter who is born after 2005, 9/9/2005, she becomes co-pastor, no doubt. But if there is a daughter who is born before that date, whether she also becomes co-pastor. And here the High Court was just confronted with that heading of the section, head note, what we call technically. Head note of that section in 1956 was that devolution of interest in a co-pastor. Devolution itself means passing of the property on death. And therefore, in Ganorkar's case, High Court said that since head note of that section is retained as it is, आणि आपल्याकडे आजकाल लेजिस्लेशन करताना नवीन करताना पहिल्यासारखी काळजी घेतली जात नाही. आपण काय करतो हे लक्षात न घेता जुनी हेड नोट चालू राहिली. And therefore, High Court came to a conclusion that unless there is the heritage, that is to say property passes from the deceased, there is no question of application, and hence the daughters who are born after this date, 9/9/2005, are included, but those born before that date will not be included, otherwise it will be retrospective effect to the law. Here now, when this matter was before Supreme Court and subsequently before a larger bench of Bombay High Court also, the rules of interpretation of statutes were followed. In interpretation of statutes, one of the rules is that when there is a conflict in the meaning, what technically we call an ambiguity. Ambiguity may be latent, ambiguity may be patent. Here, the head note of the section speaks one thing, that devolution of interest in co-pastory. And subsequent new section speaks that any interest that will pass under this act, to every co-pastory this will apply, whether a female heir or not. Now there is a conflict between two, and rule of law is, see the object. Object is to do justice to women, one. And two, another rule is, when there is a conflict between head note and section, section prevails, head note does not. And therefore we will have to say, we read section only. And if section is read as absolute thing, then in that case, it will be this way, that the section, when read in the light of this, the daughter shall become co-pastor if she is living on the date of amendment, that is 9/9/2005. In other words, though it is retrospectively applicable, though daughter is born before that date, she becomes co-partner. When this was there, now we will be coming to some important propositions or decisions of the Supreme Court, because there are so many conflicting decisions on this subject that going through various decisions is just increasing your confusion. But before that, I will deal with one important thing, that normally what you find, असं काय घडतं आपल्याकडे की एखादा बाप गेला आणि शेतकरी असतील तर नेहमीच हे घडतं बघा, जिथे जिथे जमिनी आहेत ना मोठ्या, बाप गेला की एक महिना 15 दिवसानं तलाठ्याकडे एक एंट्री होते, म्युटेशन एंट्री ज्याला आपण म्हणतो 6D. अँड इन दॅट म्युटेशन एंट्री अमुक 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 तारखेला मयत, वारस मुलगा अमुक मुलगी अमुक, आणि ही वारसांची नावं लागली. 7/12ला त्याच्याप्रमाणे एंट्रीज झाल्या. 2-3 महिने जातात आणि 2-3 महिन्यानंतर मग आपल्याकडे एक डॉक्युमेंट येतं तलाठीकडे. आणि आता तुमच्याकडे आमच्याकडे सगळ्या वकिलांच्याकडे कॉम्प्युटर झालीत, कॉम्प्युटरवरती ड्राफ्ट रेडी असतात, नव्यानं लिहायची गरज नसते. काय करायचंय तो भाऊच सांगतो, मुलगी सांगतच नाही, बहीण सांगतच नाही, हाच म्हणतो माझ्या बहिणीला हक्कसोड पत्र करायचे, रिलिंक्विशमेंट डीड. अँड द वर्डिंग इज ऑल्सो फिक्स्ड की माझ्या वडिलांनी माझं लग्न खूप थाटामाटात करून दिलं, माझ्या घरी मी फार सुखी आहे, आणि माझं आणि माझ्या भावाचं लहानपणापासून नैसर्गिक प्रेम आहे, खूप प्रेम आहे. अशा भावा बहिणीचं असतंच बघा. आणि मग त्या नैसर्गिक प्रेमापोटी मी माझा ह्या प्रॉपर्टी मधला हिस्सा माझ्या भावाच्या लाभात सोडून देत, बिना मोबदला सोडून देत आहे. याला हक्कसोड पत्र असं नाव दिलं जातं. काही ठिकाणी इंग्लिशमध्ये लिहिलं तर रिलिंक्विशमेंट डीड म्हणतात. मी असं सांगतोय आपल्याला, आणि हे फार महत्वाचं आहे की एव्हरी सच हक्कसोड पत्र और रिलिंक्विशमेंट डीड is illegal, invalid. And let's see why it is illegal and why I say that it is invalid. The reason for this is the Hakkasod Patra or relinquishment deed requires two types of ownership. That one person holding superior right, another person holding inferior right. Suppose that I am lessor owner and I grant you a lease on my property for 50 years. After 25 years, today you come and you say, I am not in a position to pay that heavy rent. I relinquish my interest. The moment he relinquishes interest, that reverts back to me. पण त्याच वेळेला आपण हे ध्यानात ठेवायचं की समजा माझ्याकडे हा इंटरेस्ट आला आता, आणि नंतर मी ही प्रॉपर्टी तिसऱ्याला विकली, आणि तिसऱ्याला सांगितलं की मी अगोदरच्या माणसाला 50 वर्षाचा लीज दिला होता, त्यानं 25 वर्षच वापरलेली आहेत, बाकीची 25 वर्षे त्याने रिलिंक्विश केली, ती माझ्याकडे आली, जरी मी तुला प्रॉपर्टी विकली तर मी तुझा टेनंट आहे. हे चालेल का? नाही चालणार. बिकॉज देर इज मर्जर ऑफ राइट्स. व्हेन देर इज अ इन्फिरियर राइट that is relinquished, it merges into superior right. There is a duplicity of rights. The co-partnership continues, and one of the co-partner relinquishes, possible. In a co-partnership, how much is the interest of a person? And here, understand a proposition, कि हिंदू co-partnership मध्ये जी ओनरशिप आहे, याला जॉइंट ओनरशिप म्हणायचं असतं. पार्टनरशिप, बाकीचे को ओनर असतात तिथे को ओनरशिप असते. इन को ओनरशिप each one holds a defined share, either equal or whatever the proportion stated in a particular document or contribution in the consideration may be, and that is co-ownership. While a joint ownership, which is co-partnership ownership, there is no defined interest, each owns whole, altogether whole, what is known as commensality of interest. When there is commensality of interest, even if one dies, nothing matters. There is no property without owner, survivorship. पूर्वी काही एखाद्याने समजा संन्यास घेतला, renounce the world, then also they said, all right, his share will pass to others. मग इथे जेव्हा superior right is there and then inferior right is given up, it is all right. But here, when father died, Section 6 applied, new Section 6 now under the Act of 2005. Under the Act of 2005, Section 6, Clause 2 and Clause 3 read together. They say that the property of the father shall be partitioned and going to the heirs proportionately. Daughter will get her own share. आता ह्या ठिकाणी आपला जो प्रॉब्लेम आहे हक्कसोड पत्राचा, यातली प्रत्येक डॉटर ही मॅरिड डॉटर आहे बघा. कारण त्यात म्हटलेलंच आहे की मी माझ्या घरी सुखी आहे, लग्न खूप थाटात झालंय वगैरे. मग ती जर मॅरिड डॉटर आहे तर ती फादरच्या फॅमिलीची मेंबर आहे का? शी इज ट्रान्सफर्ड इन हजबंड्स फॅमिली and the share is defined. That share is now specific. It is not indefinite fluctuating. If that is so, हक्कसोड पत्रानं तिने सोडायचा म्हटलं तर तो जाणार कुठे? आणि इथे एक ध्यानात घ्या की रेव्हेन्यू कोड मध्ये महाराष्ट्र लँड रेव्हेन्यू कोड 66 याच्या खाली तुम्ही 7/12 घेतला, सिटी सर्वे घेतला, तुम्ही इतर वेळेला किती कॉलर वरती करून सांगितलं की मी अमक्या प्रॉपर्टीचा ओनर आहे, तरी लँड रेव्हेन्यू कोड तुम्हाला ओनर म्हणत नाही. त्याला 7/12 मध्ये तुम्हाला काय म्हणतात? धारक, ऑक्युपंट. कारण आपण सांगतो की ऑल लँड वेस्ट इन द स्टेट टेरिटरी ऑफ इंडिया, and if all land is vesting in the sovereign of India, territory of India, how a particular survey number can be yours? But India means what? All the Indias together. If the sovereign wants to enjoy the property, it is through the citizens only, and therefore property is granted by survey numbers, city survey numbers, plot numbers, etc. for enjoyment to you people. मग इथे तुम्हाला कायमची दिली नाही. superior right of state is there. इथे शेतसारा जो आहे हे कायमचं भाडं आहे. तुम्ही शेतसारा थकवा, लगेच रेव्हन्यूचे लोक येतात आणि प्रॉपर्टी जप्त करायला निघतात, आम्ही विकून टाकणार आहे, सेल करणार आहे, because superior right of the state is there. So that superior right of state is there, and sections 55 to 60 of MLRC, if you refer, those provide that if an occupant dies leaving behind no known heirs, property vests in the state, याला डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ एस्टेट असं म्हणतात, ESCHEAT. मग या डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ एस्टेट खाली superior right of state is there. Suppose that a owner, occupant, he relinquishes without saying anything, I hereby relinquish the property. The property under doctrine of estate will go to state. किंवा इथे एक सोपा रूल ध्यानात ठेवायचा की ज्याला कोणी नाही त्याला कलेक्टर आहे, त्याचं नाव तिथे येणार. If this is so, then Section 6 applied, Section 8 applied, specific share had gone to the daughter. She has become absolute owner under Section 14, and she is absolute owner, means there is no co-pastoral interest now. If in such a case, how she can relinquish? Co-pastory has ended, and if co-pastory has ended, then if she relinquishes, that will be no benefit going to the brother. Now, if she transfers, thing is all right. Otherwise, transfer for consideration will do. Even if it is a gift, will do. But why gifts are not made by these people? Because gift attracts stamp duty. आणि हक्कसोड पत्र म्हटलं की आणि रजिस्टरला एकदा पटलं की ते केलं जातं. आणि एवढ्यासाठी हा उद्योग केला जातो, परंतु हा सगळा इलिगल आहे. डॉटरनं चॅलेंज केलं तर हे टिकणार नाही. आणि मग हे सगळे जे प्रॉब्लेम आहेत ना, म्हणजे मी माझ्या मनानं सांगतोय, काही आहेत जे मीच काढलेले आहेत, परंतु जनरली असे काही प्रॉब्लेम आहेत की हे जेव्हा सुप्रीम कोर्टापर्यंत गेले गणोरकरांच्या केस नंतर, तर पहिली केस होती 2016 मधली प्रकाश वर्सेस फुलावती. मग या प्रकाश वर्सेस फुलावतीमध्ये सेक्शन 6 कसा वाचायचा आणि त्याच्यामध्ये रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव्ह इफेक्ट द्यायचा की नाही, आणि कुठल्या डॉटर्स को पार्टनर होणार, हे प्रश्न जेव्हा आले तेव्हा सुप्रीम कोर्टाने त्यात असं म्हटलं की इफ फादर इज लिव्हिंग ऑन 9/9/2005 and if daughter is living on 9/9/2005, daughter becomes co-partner, even if she was born earlier. That retrospect will do, that effect is there. The two conditions, and why Supreme Court said so, because suppose that if father had died before 9/9/2005, another rule of succession law, general law, not only Hindus, another rule is that succession is never in abeyance. There cannot be a bona vacantia. A property without owner cannot be there. The moment earlier owner dies, the property vests from that moment in the heirs. Or just to remember properly, you can say, before the body is disposed of, property is disposed of. If this is so, then if suppose that father had died before 9/9/2005, then on that date, whatever was the law, that law will apply. If that father was dying in Maharashtra, 94 amendment will apply. If that father was to die outside Maharashtra, in that case, the 1956 amendment will apply, and accordingly the share will pass. So in 2005, there is no new succession. The old position has already taken place. This was Prakash versus Phulavati. Thereafterwards, Uttam versus Saubhak Singh was another case before Supreme Court. There was a division bench, and in Uttam versus Saubhak Singh, what Justice Nariman has stated in the judgment, he has written the judgment, that because of the provisions of section 6 clause 3, now whether female heir or not, to every succession this act applies. So if this act applies to every succession, it is termination of co-partnership, at least so far female heir is concerned. Once her share is specified and her share is given to her, there is no question of any co-partnership. मग आपल्या मगाशा हक्क सोड पत्राला याचा एक आधार येतो जस्टिस नरिमनचा क्लॉज 6.3. The proposition established by this is correct. However, in that case, Uttam Saubhak Singh, the propositus, original man, the common ancestor, had died in 1973. That is to say, much before the amendment of 2005. And therefore, under section 6 old, already succession had taken place. Therefore, there was no question of deciding further case. Therefore, though decision is correct, that decision is an obiter dicta. Thereafterwards, after Uttam Saubhak Singh, there was Dhannama versus Amar. And Justice Sikri was writing the judgment. Therein, then again it was said that even if a daughter is born before 1956, question is now, so long in Uttam Phulavati Uttam Singh or Phulavati we were saying that a daughter born before 1956, whether she becomes co-partner or not. Now the question is, if a daughter is born before 1956, that amendment itself, new act itself, whether she becomes a co-partner, it was said yes, she also becomes a co-partner. Or Mangmal versus STB Raju, therein it was said that if father is not alive on 9/9/2005, then in that case, this amendment would not apply and succession under old law will take effect. Considering all this, in this Vishwajit versus Mohanty's case in November 2018, when again this problem came before the division bench, 3 judges bench. Earlier, 4 cases are there of the division bench, just on the same point. Now they said that here it appears that in last 2 cases, there is some conflicting opinion. And therefore, on this problem, a larger bench will have to be constituted. And the case is referred to a larger bench. Now we are waiting what that larger bench will do. But till then, we can have a broad formula. What that broad formula is, for you and me to argue in the courts that 2005 amendment applies if father is living on 9/9/2005, daughter is living on 9/9/2005, daughter becomes a co-partner. Even if that daughter is born before 1956, or even if that daughter was married before 1956, yet if she is living on 9/9/2005 and her father is also living in 2005, daughter becomes a co-partner, and accordingly this act will apply. Now, since really this act or whole subject is quite vast, and we were to consider this within the limited time, particularly I was happy because this is organized by the people in NBT Law College. Maybe that the present people were not there, but around 35 years back, I had gone there for some lectures and given lectures on different topics. Now those people have arranged this. Now we will use this time, further time, for any doubts or questions or answers. Feel free to ask questions. I will also feel free to refuse to answer certain questions if I do not know, or if you are asking particular cases of yours in the courts. Please go ahead. Mr. Saad Bhai, anything?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Questions are there.
Yes. What is the question?
Just a moment. The question is from Bharti Dubey. Father has 3 sons and the eldest son dies. Son dies leaving behind widow and a daughter. So what will be their right as co-partner?
So your question is that the father has 3 sons, correct? And one son dies,
yes,
leaving behind his wife and daughter. Is that
yes,
right?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Now, in such a case, that since son is dead, the co-partner is father and sons. So, as if there is a notional partition and son's share is separated. So, if there are 3 sons and father, then son's share is 1/4, and this 1/4 will pass on his death under section 6 and other provisions to his daughter, wife, etc. Daughter counted, if this has happened after 2005, daughter counted as co-partner also. Anything else?
Yes, sir. She has asked second question. In this situation, son dies leaving behind only widow and no children. So what will be the right of the widow?
Yeah. Now, for this thing, we will have to find that the section 8, right from 1956, has classified heirs of a male Hindu in 4 classes. Class 1, class 2, class 3 agnates, and class 4 cognates. Agnates means those persons, those heirs which are related to the deceased exclusively through males. And cognate means at least one of the ancestor is a female. Now, the heirs, suppose that in class 1 heirs, though there are 16 heirs, types of heirs, if there is only one heir, that one heir will get. The earlier class will exclude subsequent class. Suppose that mother is there, father is also there, and son dies. Father is in class 2, mother is in class 1. And in class 1, if there is any one heir, class 2 is excluded, class 3 is also excluded. So mother will get whole. Next question, please.
Yes, sir. This is very big question. Still, I will try to convey you. Question is from Suresh Pawar. In HUF, if one brother out of 4 brothers has a self-occupied immovable land property, if he died suddenly without a will, then his other three brothers can claim the rights of his self-occupied property?
In fact, this appears to be a real case going on in the court, but
Okay.
the care will have to be taken to see that when the
Sir, you are not audible. Yes, sir. हाँ सर. हाँ सर बोला. Sir is coming back within 1 minute. Because of network problem, it is disconnected. Just a moment, sir is back.
Hello?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
There had been some technical problem. We again resume. And the question that was posed to me was that if there are brothers, 3 brothers, and one of the brother has got self-acquired property, and other brothers say that they have got a share in that. Now, in such a case, if a joint family is there, then in the joint family, there must be some joint property also. If in the joint property, there is a co-partnership, questions will be different. But if suppose that there is no joint property, then whether these 3 brothers are together, it will be difficult thing to imagine. Maybe that they are separate. And if this property is self-acquired property, that property stands in the name of that 3rd brother. He did not do anything except asserting that I am the owner. Now, if those 2 brothers file a suit for partition, and he claims as a defendant that I am the absolute owner, it is my self-acquired property, all that those 2 brothers will plead that joint family continues joint, there is a presumption, and there was some ancestral property. And burden at the most may come on this 3rd brother who says that it is my self-acquired property. He will have to show what were the sources for acquiring that property. Accordingly, he will win that. Any other question?
Yes, sir. Next part of this question is,
yeah.
And if 2 brothers already have ownership of property of that dead brother since 1967, then how can their brother's legal heirs can claim the forcefully occupied property from that 2 brothers?
So the question is that there are 2 brothers and one is a step brother. What is the position?
Out of 4 brothers, one died.
One died.
This is in continuation of earlier question.
So and now there are 3.
Yes.
So
त्याने असं म्हटलंय की दोन भावांनी त्या डेड ब्रदरची डिसीजची प्रॉपर्टी अक्वायर केलेली आहे फोर्सफुली, आणि त्यांचे नाव पण 712 उतारावरती आहे.
पण मग आता डेड जो आहे त्याला काही वारस आहेत की नाही?
हो, त्याचे सेल्फ अक्वायर, त्याच्या वारसांनाच काही अधिकार आहे का असं विचारता येते.
आहे ना, अब्सोल्युटली. म्हणजे ती त्याची सेपरेट प्रॉपर्टी असेल, संपूर्ण वारसाला जाईल. त्याची विडो असेल, त्याची मदर असेल, त्याची सन डॉटर किंवा सन वगैरे, आणि ती जरी त्यांनी अक्वायर केलेली असेल तर दॅट विल बी जस्ट ट्रेसपास अँड नथिंग मोर. द राईट ऑफ देअर heirs is right from beginning. Anything else?
Okay, sir. Next question is from Amit Lohia. How does a wife have right in partition even though she is not a co-partner?
Wife has a right to partition.
Right in partition even though she is not a...
Yeah. Got it. The position is that this is not question in succession. This is question in joint family and co-partner. So long somebody does not die, succession problem is not there. In old textual law, the persons who are entitled to be co-partners, persons who are entitled to claim partition, and persons who are entitled to a share on partition are 3 different things. So persons entitled to be co-partners are persons within 4 degrees, but persons entitled to claim partition are those heads of the branches. Suppose that if a son is living and son's son wants to claim partition, he cannot claim partition so long his father is living and joined with his own father. He does not claim partition. Likewise, another angle is there in co-partnership law, that who are the persons who are entitled to a share on partition. And there the rule is that if there is a family consisting of father and sons, in that case, the mother, holder's wife, is entitled to a share equally with her sons, but she is not entitled to claim partition. That was one of the defects in the old law, and therefore in 56 Act, she is made absolute owner under section 14, and that particular defect is being cured Any other question?
Yes, sir. Question is from Geeta Lachani. Her question is whether Karta family have right to make a will and dispose the co-partnership property to one child. That is, if father have two daughters and one son, then whether he can make a will and transfer the property in favor of son only.
The position is clear that now after 1956, a daughter, son, widow, father, everybody, every Hindu has a right to dispose of his property by testamentary succession also. And you will find Section 29 of the Hindu Succession Act 1956, it says that if a Hindu wants to make a will, then 56 Act does not make a provision for that. It simply says that the provisions of testamentary part of Indian Succession Act 1925 shall apply. So every Hindu, male, female, even if in a co-pastory, undivided share, can make a will. And this will be made under the provisions of the Indian Succession Act 1925, the testamentary part. It is possible.
Okay,
anything
sir.
else?
Next question is from Ashish Sharma. If
Yeah.
daughter is died after 2005, then whether
Daughter
son
is-
or daughter of deceased daughter can claim share of their mother from their maternal uncle or grandfather.
Daughter is what?
Died after 2005.
So daughter is dead after 2005, she had become co-pastor. And if she had become co-pastor, thereafter she dies, whatever her share was, that will go to her heirs. Under section 1516, she being a female absolute owner under section 14, her heirs will have to be found out and to them the share will go.
Okay, sir. One question is from Nishant Bardia. How does the wife have right in partition even though she is not a co-person? आपण तो घेतलाय बहुतेक.
हा, कारण
And
त्याच्यामध्ये
हा,
त्याच्यामध्ये
हा.
एक्सेप्शनल रूल जे आहे त्याच्या खाली तो रूल आहे अँड दॅट इज नॉट इफ सपोज दॅट देर आर टू ब्रदर्स अँड दे हॅव गॉट वाईव्स अँड नाव बिटवीन ब्रदर देर इज पार्टिशन wife does not get share. It is only when there is a partition between father and sons, then mother is entitled to a share equally with sons. That is old rule.
Okay, I think we have discussed on this point. This question is from Parag Pokre. If daughter is alive on 9th of September 2005, but father died,
When?
then would daughter become a co-person?
If father died before 9/9/2005, then the moment father died, there was succession. And if there was succession on that point, whoever were the heirs of father, property was vesting in them. Therefore, in 9/9/2005, there was no property of the father which was to be shared by the daughter as a co-partner, succession having taken place already. So if succession opens before 9/9/2005, daughter will not become a co-partner. If succession does not open before, that is therefore I said that daughter must be living on 9/9/2005, father must be living on 9/9/2005. If these two conditions are satisfied, then daughter becomes co-partner. If father dies before that date, the moment father died, succession opens. On that date, whatever law was applicable, under that law, succession has taken place.
Okay, sir. Next question is from Vinay Bhokre. If ST person, he is Hindu, died having wife and two daughters, wife remarried with another, how dead person's property divided?
No, there is some misconception
Yes, yes.
that if a person dies, leaving behind wife and sons, daughters, etc. Now, if she marries subsequently, forget it. The position is the moment father died, and we said our rule is before the body is disposed of, property is disposed of. So at that moment only succession has taken place. At that time she was widow of that man. She was not remarried. And if she was remarried before his death, she was not a wife. There was divorce whatsoever it may be. So if once she has, as a heir, got the share as his widow, then under section 14 again she become absolute owner. If she marries subsequently with somebody, that will not divest her of that property.
Okay, sir.
Anything?
Next question is, is it okay to give advice of relinquishment deed, that is Hakkasod Patra, if all parties are ready to for the same, just for saving of stamp duty?
किंवा आता त्याला मराठीत बोलतो म्हणजे सगळ्यांची शंका जाईल कदाचित की हक्कसोड पत्र करण्यासाठी 2 राईट्स असावे लागतात. एक सुपिरियर राईट, एक इन्फिरियर राईट. जसा घर मालक भाडेकरू आणि भाडेकरूला जरी 10 वर्षाचा राईट आहे, तो 1 वर्षानेच म्हणतो मी सोडून जातो. द इन्फिरियर राईट मर्जेस इनटू सुपिरियर राईट अंडर रिलिंक्विशमेंट. परंतु जेव्हा तुम्ही अब्सोल्यूट ओनर असता तेव्हा हक्कसोड पत्रांना ट्रान्सफर होत नाही. रिलिंक्विशमेंट इज नॉट अ ट्रान्सफर. रिलिंक्विशमेंट ओनली गिव्स अप अ राईट. म्हणजे हक्कसोड पत्रानं ब्रदरकडे ट्रान्सफर व्हायचं असेल तर ते कसं जाणार? फक्त सिस्टरनं तिचा हक्क सोडून दिला असं त्याचा राईट होईल. आणि म्हणून करता गिफ्ट डीड केल्याशिवाय कुठलीही प्रॉपर्टी जात नाही. स्टॅम्प ड्युटी भरा, नाही तर बहिणीचा शेअर बहिणीला द्या. का नाही देत? तुमची बायको आणेल की तिच्या बापाकडनं शेअर. एवढे छोट्या मनाचे का होत आहे?
Okay, so we will take a last question because there are many questions and because of time constraint
and
can't take all questions.
Tell your people that they can have my number and they can ask me the questions even afterwards.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Whatever. What is the last
sir.
question?
They will contact me. I will share your number.
Yeah.
Last question from Vardhaman Ahwale, sir. There are father's father, father's brother, father's sister, mother and brother. Whether the married daughter can claim for partition in the property.
The proposition is put otherwise. If you say there is fathers, etc., always go to the root. That is to say, the common ancestor is the beginning point. So if father's father is living, he is the karta. He is the senior most member. He is holding the property in his name, and there are other people now. Then whoever dies, wherever dies, at that moment succession will open, and succession of each one will be taking place separately. Each heir will be getting their own shares distinctly, and that way it will go on.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable time.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. मी तुम्हाला तुमचे आभार मानतो मनापासून. एवढा वेळ तुम्ही आमच्या सोबत राहिलात आणि अतिशय महत्त्वाच्या अशा विषयावर आपण सर्वांना मार्गदर्शन केलं. काही तांत्रिक अडचणीमुळे तर हे तुमचं पहिलं लेक्चर आहे सुधाकर आव्हाड सरांनंतर. ज्या लेक्चर मध्ये जवळपास 150 पेक्षा जास्त पार्टिसिपेंट आमच्या वेटिंग रूम मध्ये होते आणि त्यांचे काही सिक्युरिटी अपडेट्स नसल्यामुळे त्यांना आम्ही जॉईन करू शकलो नाही. दुसरी अडचण अशी आली की युट्यूबला लाईव्ह न झाल्यामुळे जे काय 2-4 हजार सबस्क्रायबर्स असतील तिकडे त्यांना सुद्धा ते बघता नाही आलं. तर मी सर्वांना हा व्हिडिओ अवेलेबल करून देण्याचा प्रयत्न करेल. हा व्हिडिओ फेसबुक लाईव्ह केल्यानंतर तुम्ही डाउनलोड करून सर्वांना युट्यूब चॅनलला अवेलेबल करून देणार आहे. आता एक्झिस्टिंग पार्टिसिपेंट्सना मी रिक्वेस्ट करतो की तुमच्या फ्रेंड्स ज्यांनी हे लेक्चर मिस केलंय त्यांना कृपा करून ती लिंक किंवा तो युट्यूब चॅनल बघायला सांगा. And now I request Advocate Hani Narayani to propose vote of thanks. Hani, over to you.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of New Law Guruji web lecture series, I extend a really hearty vote of thanks to our guest of today for sparing his time from his busiest schedule to seize the occasion today. We had an opportunity to hear your thoughts, vast experiences filled with the ocean of knowledge, and this will surely be going to encourage us in the future events, sir. Your thoughts have enlightened our minds and have shown us a new path. Friends, today we had around 150 participants waiting in the waiting room. We can imagine the curiosity and scenario of the members to hear you. Thank you, sir, for your kind support. I also wish to express our gratitude to Advocate Prashant Darandale, sir, Advocate Gajanan Chaudhary, sir, for their kind support and references, and also Advocate Seema Sarnaik, ma'am, for being with us throughout the lecture web series. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to Professor Sadhwai, sir, for organizing the 20th lecture. I cannot thank everyone for being with us today. At the end, we are requesting as an organization that everyone to contribute to the PM Care Fund, donate blood and save somebody's life. I would also request everyone to kindly download the Arogya Setu application as it will keep us tested and safe. Thank you everyone for being with us this evening. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you everyone.
Thank you very much.
Once again.
Thank you.